Hello? What's going on?
It doesn't. You cannot. This point is being censored.
This point is not. This cannot be brought up. All right, I'll try it one more time.
Third time.
All right.
Wait, no.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not How I Remember It podcast. We are thrilled with the response we've gotten so far.
Yes.
This is Mandy.
And I'm Jenny.
And we are going to, as the kids say, drop a holiday episode on you here with the book, the classic Barbara Robinson tale, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. This is a part of a trilogy, which was also included the best Halloween ever and the best school year ever. But this is the one I read mostly as a child. So
yes, and I'm excited. Podcast number 2. Woohoo!
Right? I know.
And I never read the other 2 books. I just read the one about Christmas.
Yeah, I don't remember the other ones. Reading them. I may have, but this is the one I remember reading. I remember reading it many a year and enjoying it. And I picked it up, I think, once to read to my kids, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I don't even think we got through it then. Attention span of my children was not ideal for a chapter book, I think, at that point. So it was interesting to read it again because for sure this one I came to with very different memories of it now, rereading it.
Yeah, this one, definitely different memories. And I honestly, I asked my daughter, I'm like, did you read it? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, I don't know how we missed it. Like, why? She's a big reader and I don't know why she didn't read it. I should have made her read it with me this week. So
maybe she'll read it after listening to the podcast.
Exactly. She did want to read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret after the podcast.
Excellent.
And we don't really have a corrections corner or anything yet, but I was told by one of our fans, that's a funny word to say, that I forgot the Deadpool reference. Apparently in Deadpool, they mention, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Oh.
It's kind of a gory scene.
I've never seen Deadpool, so it would have gone right over my head.
Yeah, Margaret's everywhere. So, okay.
Excellent.
Back to Christmas a very special Christmas episode or podcast. I can read from inside the flap or the back of the book?
Sure. Yeah, give us a synopsis of this one in case someone hasn't read it.
Okay. The Herdmans are the worst kids in the history of the world. They lie, steal, smoke cigars, swear, and hit little kids. So no one is prepared when this outlaw family invades church one Sunday and decides to take over the annual Christmas pageant. None of the Herdmans has ever heard the Christmas story before. In their interpretation of the tale, the wise men are a bunch of dirty spies, and Herod needs a good beating. Has a lot of people up in arms, but it will make this year's pageant the most unusual one anyone has seen, and just possibly the best one ever. So I actually first heard of this book because it was a TV movie. Lady from MASH.
Yes.
Yes.
Loretta Swift, is that in it? Yeah. Okay.
Hot Lips Hooligan, or not Hooligan.
Hooligan.
Right. I was thinking hooligan, right. Beatings, the flap, the Herdmans. And those kids in that movie at the beginning were like so insane that I stopped watching it and then I didn't want to read the book. Because here's a little background on me. We had a family like that in my neighborhood, okay? And my neighborhood is a basic 1970s houses built on an old goat farm. All the houses kind of look the same. They, you could pick from like 4 or 5 houses, and then once they were all built, nobody could tell whose house was whose necessarily because they all looked almost identical, except someone had black shutters and someone's house was blue. But you go inside and like 9 out of 10 of the houses is exactly the same on the inside, except one little house down the street was this little tiny greenish tinted 1-story house, which, I love a good ranch house. I live in one now, but junk on the outside, cats on the outside. Now the kids were older than me. So instead of them bothering us at school, they would get to know neighborhood kids and then they would burglarize them. They would just rob them. So that, I hope this is not what happened to the Herdmans
right.
in later years. But that is what these neighbors did. So they would talk to kids and then they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going out of town, spring break, whatever. And then they would get robbed over spring break. And it was the brothers from this family. So I always was a little standoffish about this family, with obvious good reason. I babysat the people in back of them, and I was never really worried. But yeah, I don't know what their story really was. I tried to look them up.
Right. Trying to track them down.
Track them down. They had like a last name like Smith. So it was very difficult.
Right.
So but that's what they reminded me of, this family. And so I didn't watch it, but then I read the book and it was just lovely.
Well, and I think as a child, I think probably everyone who's read it can sort of identify people in the head they think of as, oh, that would have been the Herdman's family, right? In my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the really interesting things when I reread it as an adult, is that I remember finding a lot of comedy in these kids that were sort of rough and dirty and in trouble. And you're just like, oh, such bad kids. And as an adult, it was almost heartbreaking to read because I just, viewed it so differently as a mom, as an adult who saw that clearly these kids had some trauma in their lives. They clearly didn't have a lot of guidance. They certainly didn't have the material things that other children had, and how probably really, really challenging that had to have been. And so it was almost difficult for me to read that first chapter without feeling like, oh my gosh, I want to give these kids a hug, because clearly they don't have a lot of wins in their life right now. There's a lot of things not going right for them. And so I thought that was a really interesting perspective, because certainly as a child, I just thought, oh, those are those bad kids, those Herdmans,
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, right.
Get them out of there. Ugh.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing, but now again, as an adult, I realized, they had no attention at all. Like the mom worked at the shoe store and the social worker tried to get her only be able to work one shift at the shoe store, and she's like, no, or the shoe factory. No, I'm going to keep my 2 shifts at the shoe factory because I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
The social worker was like, yeah, I can see why she doesn't want to go home. And like they would chase cats, and you almost feel for those kids who see things from a different view as every other kid.
Yeah. And
you know what, this going off topic a teeny bit, is I didn't realize that the narrator, her name is never given.
Yes, that was interesting too, because I went back to be like, wait, I was going to write about her. What is her name again? And I couldn't find it. So then I was like, wait a second, they never named the narrator. It's the daughter of the lady who takes over the pageant. So we should sort of say there's a annual Christmas pageant every year at the church. And the lady who has done it every year, Mrs. Armstrong, gets injured. She's in the hospital. And so the mother of the narrator takes over the pageant. She's not real excited about it, but someone has to.
But, it's the what happens after there's a crazy phone tree in the 1970s. You end up with a pageant.
Yes. And so, her mom takes it over. But yeah, they never mention her. She's the narrator throughout it, and they never mention her. They do name her parents. They name her brother. Which I love that part, because the dad is like, perfect, no pageant this year. I can stay home in my robe and relax by the fire. And the mom said, no, because Charlie is wearing your robe in the pageant as a shepherd. And so the quote was, so that year my father went to see his bathrobe.
I know.
I love that quote.
The dad was funny. He was a funny character.
Yeah. And I'm sure that sort of humor went over my head as a child as well, that I really sort of appreciated this time around.
Yeah, he was really good with the dad jokes, like pretty funny dad jokes. Yeah,
right on top. And I loved the fact, this phone tree was going around about how awful the mother who was putting the pageant on was, and no one could do it like Mrs. Armstrong had done it, and all this sort of stuff. And then the mother just sort of like stepped up. It was like spite effort, like, we will make sure this pageant works. And I was like, that is my, like,
that is,
I can feel that.
Yeah, that's you. That's like, listen, no, none of you mothers who do everything the same are going to tell me what to do. Yeah.
I love that part.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that part.
Yeah, because the woman, Mrs. Armstrong, who broke her leg, she was in charge of everything in their town. And another funny dad thing was when someone was at the door, and the woman kept calling her and talking, and the family wanted dinner. She's like, hold on, someone's at the door. And it was the dad ringing the doorbell so she'd get off the phone.
Yeah.
She's like, really? And then she's like, where were you 10 minutes ago? So
I know.
They're a funny family.
Yeah. The writing in here was really funny. There were lots of different lines. Like there was a line that says, the first pageant rehearsal was usually about as much fun as a 3-hour ride on a school bus and just as noisy and crowded. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have been on field trips where I think you couldn't pay me to do this again. And so that writing about as much fun as a 3-hour ride on a school bus, really, I was like, yes, that is, you got it. Like that sounds miserable.
Yeah. Oh, I get bus sick. So it would be terrible.
Right. And then I also liked how the mom was going to decide she was going to ignore everything except blood. And I was like, that's my kind of mom, right? If you're not bleeding, figure it out yourselves. I am not, we can't stop this train from rolling.
We've only got 5 or 6 weeks. We've got to keep going. And so to give an idea about what these herdmans were like, there was, I don't know, how many kids were there? 6? Herdmans?
Yeah, I lost count at some point, but yeah.
There was, anyway, a lot of them, and they seemed to be in every single grade, and they just bullied everybody, and so one of the examples was the girl, Imogene. She would be in the nurse's office when apparently there was a thing where they would weigh you and do your height, and she made up this excuse to get the nurse to go to her brother's classroom, and then she stole all the weights and heights and then would bribe the kids who were on the heavier side for their goods. Like there was Wanda Pierce had a charm bracelet, and she was like, listen, I know how much you weigh and give me your charm bracelet. And it said that the charm bracelet was $6.95. So since this book was made in 71 or written in 71, I looked up the inflation calculator, and so that would be $45 today.
All right, so some value there.
If she had like 20 charms for $45, that's a pretty expensive bracelet.
Yeah. That was some smart thinking, some research there, Jenny. I like that.
I have a lot of time on my hands. So
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I also loved how the one girl, Alice, who had always played Mary, she was like that perfect girl. Her mom was involved in the church. She was involved in the church. Every year she played Mary, and the minister's son played Joseph. And it said that her mom wouldn't even allow her to hang out with somebody who had 2 rabbits. Like that's like explain like how straight laced they were. That even if you had 2 rabbits, that could be a little risque.
So you can't play with her. Yeah.
It was like a great understanding of like how serious this family was, and she was taking notes. She didn't get chosen as Mary this year. Well, she didn't volunteer as Mary. The Herdmans did, and so then she was taking notes at every rehearsal to report back to her mom, like all the horrible things that were going on or being discussed,
to hopefully blackmail somebody into something. But didn't work out that way.
No.
But yeah, because, that was just the typical perfect mother who thinks everyone else is doing it wrong. And I mean, so her daughter, had a little like Harriet the Spy notebook in her.
That's a great other book. We should look into that.
We should do that in her pocket, and, and would write, everything that, like smoking in the bathroom, which now if you're smoking a cigar in the bathroom, why you aren't kicked out of the play in the first place, I'm not sure. But, it was the 70s.
It's the 70s.
There wasn't enough time to...
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was really sweet how... I loved how it was through the narrator's eyes, but then it interspersed action from the adults, but they were, the supporting characters in this case.
Yes.
And I liked that the Herdmans, who all ended up starring in the play, well, because they threatened the other children, but they still ended up starring in the play. But it was the first thing they'd ever really had any interest in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they wanted to go to the library and do research on King Herod and baby Jesus. And it, you know, it was just something they wanted to learn more about, which was good. And then the librarian was a little bit like, oh, I can't believe they want books. And it's like, no,
Right.
no, embrace that they want books. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I you know, that
You would.
Right. Exactly. Sometimes the librarian comes across as a cranky old lady in books, which I can understand, but it was because, and I really sort of felt for him. It was kind of the first time they were getting some positive attention,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they were really intrigued. They all were really sort of interested in the story. And so I loved that they sort of wanted to learn more, to, you know, play their roles better. They wanted to add on to it by, you know, defending Mary, protecting the baby more.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the baby is, I guess in past years they'd had like a real baby, a church member, and this year nobody wanted their baby to be held by Imogene Herdman. So she said, well, there's always 2 or 3 babies outside the supermarket. I'll go take one. I'm like, what? Why were there babies in their carriages outside the supermarket?
Again, that had to be a 70s thing, right?
When people did that, I'm just going to leave her here and go in and get a ham.
Right? I don't know. I'm like, what? I did question that, but you know, the 70s were a different time, and I guess you could, you know, leave your kids in the car or
right. You didn't have a car seat, so why not just be left outside of the store?
I don't know. Yeah. I thought that was a very entertaining. That she was just gonna go get a baby. We'll just kidnap one for the show.
It'll be fine.
There were so many things that they wrote, that Barbara Robinson wrote in here, that really sort of gave you insight into the life of the Herdman children. For example, when they were going to play the wise men and they were bringing oils, and they're like, oils? You get better gifts from the firemen. You know, and it talked about the whole, how they get there. Yeah. How that's where they got their gifts, and they weren't great gifts, but at least they got gifts. And and like, they were like, who brings the baby oil? Let's get some good stuff in here. Yeah. I love that sort of, thing. And that the wise men, when they couldn't quite like wrap their head around what they meant by the wise men. And so they're like, do you mean like teachers? And someone goes, no, you dumbbell, like the president of the United States.
And I'm like, oh, it's a different time, children.
I just thought it was funny. Like, here are these kids who, you know, for someone who's grown up in the church and heard, you know, the Christmas story year after year after year, that these kids were so, like, it was so foreign to them that they didn't even understand what the wise men were, or, you know, what the shepherds were doing and things like that. And so I thought it was really interesting, like you said, about how engaged they got and how interested they were about learning more about it.
And I learned more too as an adult, because thanks to the internet, you know, now back then I would have had to go to the card catalog, and I would have just been a lot of work. But now I was looking at information, you know, the real Christmas story is darker than the Christmas card Christmas story and pageants that, you know, are put on. And I, you know, had kind of blocked that out. And, you know, obviously King Herod, he's not in the play. And like I said, like, it's not like a lovely Christmas card scene with animals, and I mean, it is, but it's not. It's like the whole story is darker. And I was reading, and someone had said that in the midst of blinking decorations and flickering candles, darkness threatens the light, and ignoring darkness is ignoring reality. And so we leave King Herod out of this Christmas story because we think we're supposed to keep hardships of the real world away from Christmas. By someone named Brett Younger said that. And
Brett, that's
very deep, Brett. And but it's kind of, it's true a bit. That's kind of what we do about a lot of things. We kind of gloss over the bad, and not that we want King Herod in our, you know,
in the church Christmas pageant, but
teeny people's Christmas story. But you know, it's just it makes you go, and it made me, even as an adult, learn a little bit more about the whole story and remember little parts that I had kind of
Right.
forgotten when my kids were in, a story
Right.
talking about, angels and the baby, and it's all nice and cozy and but there is no room at the inn, and
Yeah. I loved, there was this part near the end about how when Mary and Joseph came into, or the Herdman kids came into the sanctuary, that they just sort of stood there a little bit lost and confused. And she said, the narrator, oh my gosh, the narrator is so good about how must be like what it is for refugees, sort of sent to wait in some strange, ugly place with all their things around them. And she said, it suddenly occurred to me that this was just the way it must have been for the real Holy Family, stuck away in a barn by people who didn't care about what happened to them. And it really sort of struck me that, like, yes, I remember it being like, oh, and it all worked out and the Herdmans were, played this role.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that it really sort of sunk in the sort of impactfulness of these kids who didn't know the story, who were also sort of struggling and didn't have the, finer, nicer things, sort of representing Mary and Joseph, who were also, in this, like, traveling to try and find shelter to, have their baby.
Yeah, the Herdmans, they were kind of outsiders in their own way.
Yeah.
And just to see the twinkling lights and the candles, and it was just, part of me is going, I hope it lit a fire under her, and then she went on to do something,
Right.
Like I kept wanting the story to go on and to know, like, what happened to them after. Like, did the mom, I don't know, did somebody help them then, like, discover their talents, or was it the 70s and they just kind of got swept back under the rug? And
Right. Was the congregation, like, welcoming to them? Because that was another thing that I thought really sort of resonated with me as an adult, was that how some people feel very judged by people in the church. Like Alice is making her list of everything they're doing wrong, right? They don't look the part, they don't sound the part, they don't act the part.
Yeah.
And so I thought all the other ladies of the church on the phone tree, like, oh my gosh, this is awful, going to the minister to complain that they should pull the kids out.
Mm-hmm.
And it really sort of resonated with me as an adult that that's how a lot of people feel about church. Like, they just don't feel like they fit in. They don't look the part, sound the part, and they feel like they're being judged. And I thought, I hope that everyone sort of, like, learned from the pageant, that, and sort of embrace them and welcome them and let them, be a part of it as well. After the pageant as well, because you don't really sort of follow up with that in this book, at least. Maybe they did in the other two, but that certainly went over my head as a child.
Yeah.
But as an adult, I was like, I hope that, some people from the church were like, hey, we're happy you're here. We'd like you to continue to come, and not just like, okay, that was fun. We did that once. We're going to go back to the way we do things from now on.
I mean, I would like that to happen, but based on people in general, I'm thinking, they probably just still were like, well, they're still Herdmans and they're still dirty, and their mom walks the cat and their garage door flips up and down all the time. And the thing that drives me as an adult the craziest is the people who are they go to church and they pray and they're this, but then you go outside and you're a school pickup and they don't say hello to you. I'm like, what are you doing in church? What that's Jesus would say hello,
Right.
Like,
Yeah. It was that really was what sort of stayed with me from this book. I remember as a child being like, oh, it was so silly. And then they did the pageant. And as a child who grew up in a church and did the pageant every year, it was very relatable to me. But as an adult reading it, I just was about these Herdmans and who was there for them, who was still welcoming and including them and, looking out for them. Because even the social worker seemed like she was fed up, done.
Yeah,
with the
she
Herdmans.
just did not like going there.
Yeah.
I liked that when you mentioned earlier the wise men So the social worker dropped off a basket at their house, or the church gave them a basket. And then he used the ham as the offering
Yes.
instead of the oil, because why would you want oil? He couldn't wrap his head around years past. So he offers up the ham, and then he didn't want it back though. He was like, no, it was a gift. So it's like he learned how to give without wanting something in return. So,
right.
He learned a lovely lesson.
That part, actually, I was a little teary at that part. I wasn't crying, but I got a little teary because the thought that here these kids who, the main reason they came to church in the first place, right, is because Charlie, the narrator's brother, had said, oh, I get candy and cakes and stuff like that all the time at church. And they were like, wait, hold up. There's free food at church?
Snacks?
So that's why they came to church. And so you knew that food was a significant thing. And so for them to give away that ham as their gift to the baby Jesus, it was really so moving to me that, these are kids who are hungry. They don't have a lot. And to have given up this significant amount of food as their gift because they thought that the oil gift was such a bad idea was really, really touching to read.
Yeah, I liked that. And I did definitely miss that as a child. And, I think also they did their story a little different. Gladys, was a little bossier than the normal Angel. But I think, and it made the narrator think like, okay, so every year we do it exactly the same way, but maybe exactly the same way, we're not even seeing it anymore. So when it was done a different way, she saw it with these new eyes and actually learned something, where we do everything the same all the time and again and again and again because that's how we think we're supposed to. It kind of loses something.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, a lot of the church ladies making their applesauce cake and sitting in the kitchen and talking on their phone tree, miss the point of it. The mom of the narrator, they learned. I think she was very happy with how her pageant had gone, and she learned something at the end that, doing it a little bit differently can help us learn and grow. And we were talking about, I hope the other families, notice that doing it different is, can be just as great as the same old angels and the bathrobes and the wings and the everything. So
and there's my
your dog liked the
barking.
book. Yeah, I really liked this book, and I definitely learned a lot from reading it as an adult. And it was one of those that totally, again, held up, no cringing. It was so sweet, and I could really relate to the mom and the church ladies and the kids, and it was such a nice little Christmas story.
It was a really lovely Christmas story, and I thought, oh, and now I know why I read it so often as a child, but I maybe should have read it to my own children too, or at least finished it the one year I did try to read it. But I really again thought it held up. I've been impressed so far. 2 for 2, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think it's really sort of interesting how at least the first couple books we've read and a few others that we have coming up the pipeline, how short they are as chapter books. And I think, I don't know if it's like the J.K. Rowling effect, that every book now has to be like 300, 400 pages to be a, middle grade fiction book, because books generally the size, 100 pages or so, tend to be like beginning chapter books. Like they're not considered real chapter books for, but I think maybe kids would feel a little bit more accomplished if they were reading, multiple 100-page books as opposed to trying to take out a 350-page book and then feeling overwhelmed by it. So I thought that was really sort of interesting so far, that some of my most beloved books from my youth were these like little paltry books that my own kids probably wouldn't pick up because they don't look like they're substantial books.
So, but they, it's sometimes harder to tell a story in less words.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did read about the author who had been a poet and had written magazine articles and adult novels. And she said she really sort of got into children's books and really sort of loved them because she's like, write a children's book, it has to be the most entertaining, the most funny, like the most get to the point, because the kids they're not gonna stick around. And I thought, oh, she's so right? No one wants 100 pages of like learning about the background of these characters, and just like get to it. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying rereading these books, is that you just sort of get to the story. There's none of that fluff.
And yeah, I agree. And I read it and I'm like, oh, that was quick, that was fun.
Yeah.
And I liked it. And then I went and I was looking for the movie and I found it's on YouTube. So
excellent. I was going to say, I wonder if it's streaming, but it is on YouTube.
And it's not a long movie either. It was about, 45 minutes. So it was probably like in an hour time slot.
Yeah.
Which is probably why it's not repeated very often, because it didn't fit the typical movie timeline, 2 hours,
Maybe I'll have to show my kids over winter break.
Yeah, it was very, very enjoyable. It
was more after school special.
It was, yeah.
Just another fabulous thing.
Yeah, we'll have to watch some.
Well, this was so much fun. I'm glad that we had a special Christmas episode.
Yeah.
This wasn't on our list of books to read. We would love for you to follow us on Not How I Remember It on Instagram, or you can email us at nothowirememberit@gmail.com. We are now available on all the podcasting platforms, Apple, Google. So you can find us wherever. You can find us on Amazon Music. So check us out.
Yeah, wherever.
Subscribe.
Mm-hmm. I don't really know what happens when you subscribe or leave a review, but do that too, because it's supposed to help us. Which I don't know what it does, but yeah. But just press the button and yeah.
So, and we hope you're enjoying it. We are really grateful for the feedback we got on the first one. We sort of did this as a fun, entertaining thing for us during these COVID times when we really can't be together, but we can certainly do a podcast via Zoom. And so this has been really fun for us, and we hope you are continuing to enjoy it.
Yep, and happy whatever you celebrate.
Absolutely. Happy holidays. All right.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.